Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the City of Santa Ana Special Events Virtual Training tonight. My name is Margarita Macedonio with the City of Santa Ana's Neighborhood Initiatives Program, and we're so glad that you can join us. We have a lot of information to cover, and we just wanted to, as people are joining in, we wanted to present some of our panelists tonight. That way you can connect the face with the emails, with the future communications that you will have organizing special events in your neighborhood. So let's start off with Sonia Batres, Recreation and Community Services Supervisor. Hi, Sonia.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here, and thank you for giving of your time to sit in on the special events training. My name is Sonia Batres. I'm the Recreation Community Services Supervisor, and I'm going to go through a couple items today to help you have your next event in Santa Ana. So, Alyssa, if you could go to the next screen. Margarita, do you want to go over these items before we start?
Sure. I just wanted to acknowledge some of the other panelists on the call. We have Amber Campos, so you can just wave to the other panelists from the police department. So Amber is our police community services specialist. And we also have from our Orange County Fire Authority, we have Josephine Sanchez. And we have from our healthcare agency for the county, Shah Rashidi. So she's also on the call. And everyone knows Alyssa Ventura from Neighborhood Initiatives. And we have Frank Bejarano from Neighborhood Initiatives, who just started today, who's joining us. Victor Chaidez from Public Works. Hi, Victor. And yeah, let's go over the first slides. I think Alyssa has a couple of housekeeping slides, and then we'll take it to you, Sonia.
Hi, everyone, and welcome. So a couple of ways for you to participate in tonight's meeting. If you can use either the raise your hand function or either type of question. If you have a comment or question, we will stop throughout the presentations to go over any questions. So please use the raise your hand function or type in your question in the chat box. If anyone is dialing in, dial *9 to raise your hand and then dial *6 to unmute yourself. Thank you.
Hey, Sonia.
Okay, all right, thank you for that. Let's go on to the first slide. We're going to talk about the special events policy. First off, not sure if everybody's aware, we have a new special events policy. We didn't have one before. So basically, a lot of you may already be familiar with the policy. It's just now it's official. And the resolution was adopted on January 18th of 2022. So what the policy does, basically, it provides equitable and reasonable access to all city public facilities. We want to make sure that all of our park spaces and public spaces are available for the community. It also provides guidance for the use of city facilities for the following 4 types of permits, which we'll be talking about several of those permits today. So those 4 permits are park facility permits, film permits, land use certificates, as well as special event permits. So the first one we're going to talk about is my favorite, because it's under parks, is our park facility permits. So basically, it's exactly what it says. This is the permit that would be required if you are using a city park. This also does include our stadium, as well as Plaza Calle Cuatro, which is in our downtown area. So an example of a park facility permit, for example, would be a concert at Windsor Park or a veterans ceremony at Fisher Park. So those are 2 examples of a park facility permit. And once again, it is issued by the Parks, Recreation, and Community Services Agency. You may not be aware, but we also issue film permits. So our office under Parks and Recreation We handle all of our film permits. So anywhere in the city you want to film, you would be required to have a film permit. It's for both commercial motion picture or electronic videotape. It does not include, just for your information, news gathering. So if any networks come into the city that want to film, they are not required to have a film permit, but everyone else is. So mostly for commercial purposes. An example of this is one that we just had, which was really exciting. 20th Television came in and filmed at our train station. We also had Acura commercials at our 2nd Street Promenade. So those are 2 examples of film permits. Land use certificates. So this one may not be one that you might use regularly, but it's good for you to know. Land use certificates allow the temporary use of private commercial property for outdoor short-term activities. For example, flower sales in the parking lots, Christmas tree sales in parking lots, COVID vaccination events. Sometimes you'll be seeing those in the parking lots of certain businesses. So those are all examples of land use certificates, and those are issued by the Planning and Building Agency with also review from the Santa Ana Police Department. And my colleague Amber Campos will be talking a little bit more about land use certificates a little bit later. Special event permit. So special event permits is the big one. This is if you want to use any other public property that's not city parks. So for example, if you want to have a street festival, the art walk that's held in downtown on 2nd Street, that is an example of a special event permit. Farmers markets, community celebrations and observances, parades, neighborhood activities, for example, such as block parties. I know a lot of our neighborhood associations have had concerts or movie nights in the streets. So those are all examples of special event permits. So if you're not having your event at a park, more than likely you'll be going through the special event permit process with Santa Ana Police. Before I continue to the event permit process, are there any questions in regards to the types of permits?
So as a reminder, if you have any questions, raise your hand, or you can also type it in the chat box.
Okay, no problem. We'll go ahead and continue. And if there's any questions, feel free to just add it to the chat. So we created this little flow chart. Hopefully it makes the process easy for you to understand. So the first number 1 step is obviously completing an event permit application. Something that we did do differently that many may not be familiar with is that we combined our permit application with police and parks. So now you only have to fill out 1 application if you're using a park, if you're planning to do it in the street, if you want to, have your event in a promenade. All those locations will be the same application, will be the event permit application. The next step after you fill out your permit application is to attach a site plan. Now, we can accept your application without a site plan, but I strongly recommend that you attach a site plan because it helps us identify what locations you want to use. It will expedite your review and make our job a lot easier to know what locations you'll want to use, as well as the scale of your event. So attaching a site plan will help us expedite the review. Once you attach your site plan, you'll submit both the application and site plan to special events at santa-ana.org, and that's a general email. Even if you have a question, that email is great because we'll make sure to get it to the right person. I think there is a question in the chat. Would I need a park permit if I wanted to have a story time or craft time at the park? Is there a certain group size as a rule of thumb for requiring a park permit? Yes, those are great questions. So yes, if you're having a story time or a craft time at the park, if it's open to the public, you will require a park permit. If it was a private event, if you were just having it for a specific group of people, then you do not need a permit. So it really changes things if it's going to be something that you're inviting the public to attend. Hopefully that answered your question. The next step is application review. So this review can vary as much as we'd like to expedite all of the reviews. It really depends on how many permit applications we have in. Obviously, the more complex the event, the longer it may take to review, because it's not only reviewed by the agency that issues the permit, but police does review every application that we receive. So it's really important to give our agencies the time to thoroughly review your request. So it could take about a week. It could take a little bit longer if your event is more complex. The next step is to attend a pre-event planning meeting. So once you attend a pre-event planning meeting, that meeting is for us to discuss your event in more detail. We understand that at the time that you apply to the time that to this point, your event may have changed. You might have changed the layout, you might have added an element. So the meeting is really for us to sit down, talk to you about your event, and go over all the details. At this meeting, we'll also review your permit requirements, which we'll review today. Permit requirements is everything that you'll be submitting as far as materials and approvals, so that we can go ahead and issue your permit. After you submit all your permit requirements, you'll be paying your deposit and permit fees. This may or may not apply depending on the type of permit that you're applying for. For example, for park facility fees, neighborhood associations no longer need to pay for those fees for those specific permits, but you may need to pay for the other types of permits, or if you're paying for police overtime or staffing of any kind. So it does depend on the permit that you're applying for. And lastly, once you've paid, you've submitted all your permit requirements, then the last step is for us to email you your permit, and then you're good to go. Application deadlines. So there are different deadlines depending on the permit that you are applying for. So for example, the park facility permits has 3 categories now. And this is something new that was added when we developed the events policy. Events are now categorized by minor, moderate, and major events. So minor events are events up to 100 people. Moderate events are 100 to 1,000, and major events are 1,000 and up. And these, once again, are specific to park facility permits. So for the minor and moderate events, which I believe a lot of the neighborhood association events don't go over 1,000 typically, those will be the same deadline as we've been doing, as 45 business days to 6 months, which means anything earlier, anything closer to your event that's less than 45 days would be considered late. And unfortunately, we wouldn't be able to accept a late application. So you would want to make sure to turn in your application between 45 business days to 6 months. For anything larger than 1,000 people, it will take about 90 business days to 1 year prior to your event date for us to process. For us to accept. So you'll want to make sure to give yourself enough time to submit your application so that you don't miss that deadline. For special event permits, which are under the Santa Ana Police Department, which I mentioned, where any events that are not at city parks, it's a minimum of 30 days. It could be a maximum of 180 days. So once again, it's really dependent on how big your event is and how complex your event is. If you have any questions on what a specific deadline would be for your type of event, you're more than welcome to contact us. There was a question in the chat: do nonprofits pay park fees for community resource fairs? Yes, so we do have fees for nonprofits. We also have fees based on resident, non-resident. And the best way to get an estimate for your event is to submit an application, and we can give you the most accurate estimate. Right now, the only fees that do not apply for park facility permits is for neighborhood associations. For land use certificates, those are a little bit quicker because those usually tend to be a little bit smaller scale events, and those are 10 business days. But once again, it may require a little bit longer if, for example, let's say there's an event in a parking lot, but it will require a street closure, or it's going to have some type of other event element that would take a longer review. So it may be more than 10 business days, but typically 10 business days for land use certificates. And lastly, for film permits, we do review film permit applications for 10 to 15 business days. So I'm sorry, we do require application 10 to 15 business days before your first filming date. Once again, those may require a longer review if it's a complex production or large scale production. There was a question. Oh, Christina. Hi, Christina. You were asking, are permits required for a neighborhood event that is not open to other neighborhoods? Could this be considered a private event? It really depends. It's hard for me to answer that. It really depends on the type of event that you're having, the amount of people that you're expecting, the type of activity that you have planned. So the answer is it could be. It really is dependent and would vary on a, we'd have to review your application on a case-by-case basis. All right, let's go on to permit requirements. So a lot of you are familiar with our permit requirements. Everyone does a really great job getting in all the materials that we need before issuing your permit. So thank you for that. So briefly, I wanted to go through each item. Once again, the site plan is number one as far as your permit requirement. Certificate of insurance and additional insured endorsement. One-day peddler event participant list. Traffic plan, which is required for street closures or street modifications, your waste management plan, as well as your security plan. Not all of these may apply, but I'm just giving you an exhaustive list. Non-city permit requirements would be an OC healthcare permit. So for example, if you plan to have food and beverage distribution, and an OC fire permit or special event permit through the fire department for specific types of activities and events. And we'll go over that. And we have our members from both agencies here to answer any questions on those items. All right, site plan. So I gave an example here. This is just one example of a site plan. A lot of you may be familiar with site plans. I've already created some for us. But a great site plan has the following, shows every event area. For example, if you have a backstage area, if you have parking area, if you have a stage area, kids zone. So you would want to indicate every event area. Event equipment. So if you're going to have canopies, tables, chairs, generators are really, really important. So indicating what type of equipment and where it'll be located. Street closures. So for example, in the example on the screen, in this case, the organizer was going to be closing Center Street, and they were demonstrating what area of the street they'd be closing and where their barricades would be located. Traffic control equipment. So for the site plan, it could be very basic traffic control equipment, which would be different than your traffic control plan, which will be a lot more specific. But at least for your site plan, we would like to have an idea of what streets or alleys or anything of that nature you'd be closing or utilizing. And lastly, if you plan to have a route, maybe you're having a march, maybe you're having a parade. So we would also want to see where your starting and end point would be and which direction you'll be going as far as your parade or route. Okay, we're going to go on to insurance. So for insurance, our neighborhood associations only have 3 easy steps to request a quote from the city's insurance carrier. So the number 1 step would be to visit the website Sparta. Sparta is our insurance program. And you can do it all online, which is great. And the link is listed on the screen. You would click on that link and complete the online form that's listed as CLIP prompt cover application. Once you fill out the form, there's going to be a section that is asking what is the public entity that's requesting the insurance. And you'll want to select the Santa Ana City of ICRMA. So it's very important. When you select that, the program will know what our city requirements are and will make sure to list your request under City of Santa Ana. And lastly, once your request is evaluated, Sparta will email a quote to you for review. Once you get that quote, it's very, very important. You don't want to miss this step. Please forward the quote to RMD and copy both Margarita and the staff requesting the insurance. So for example, if I'm requesting your insurance for a park permit, you'll want to send that quote to RMD, copy Margarita, and copy myself. That way we will know that you have submitted that quote to RMD, and RMD will go ahead and process that insurance quote for you. The one-day peddler event participant list. You may have exhibitors at your event or vendors, and all exhibitors and vendors that are going to be on site for your event are required to have a Santa Ana business license. Many of those exhibitors, vendors may already have a license from Santa Ana, so as long as it's current, they're good to go. If they're outside of Santa Ana, they are required to obtain a license. But the one-day peddler list is helpful for you because you can just complete that list, put all of your exhibitors and vendors on that list, and our business tax department can review it and let you know which ones will require a license. And your exhibitors and vendors would be required to then obtain their own licenses through the business tax department. The only groups that are exempt are public school districts and government agencies. But of course, if you have any questions on whether a group is exempt or not, you're more than welcome to connect with the business tax department. I'm gonna go ahead and ask Victor if you can unmute. Would you like to introduce yourself, Victor?
Yes, hello everybody. My name is Victor Chivas. I work for the City of Santa Ana Public Works Traffic Engineering Department. Just a little bit touching up on what has already been said. What I do is I basically review the traffic control plans, make sure it complies with federal and state and our local guidelines in terms of safety, and basically just make sure the liability is lessened for the city.
Thank you, Victor. So just a couple items on the screen. Basically, your traffic control plan is going to indicate the routes, the detours, and all the traffic control equipment that you're going to need for your event. As Victor mentioned, it needs to be approved and stamped by the city's traffic engineering department. So once we receive your traffic plan, we forward that to Victor's department, and they'll go ahead and review it. They may have recommendations to make changes, and then we'll let you know. You'll send that back to us, and then we'll once it's 100%, we'll give you the green light. Some street closures may require a signature page, which means you would need to get the approval of 80% of residents and businesses impacted by a street closure. We want to make sure that your event is not going to negatively impact any homes or businesses. So that just allows those residents and businesses to approve your street closure. And lastly, really important, because Victor always wants me to remind people about water-filled K-rails and how important those are for street closures. So just keep in mind that if we are requiring water-filled K-rails, it's for safety. We want to make sure that if you're having an event in the street, that your attendees are going to be safe, and that there aren't any cars that are going to be accidentally driving through that closure. So it's very important, if you're utilizing a traffic control company, that they have a water truck to be able to fill those K-rails or those water-filled K-rails, which you'll see an example on your screen.
Yes.
Victor, did I miss anything?
No, that's perfect. Thank you for mentioning that.
Perfect, thank you. Next slide. Okay, well, I'm not about to explain the healthcare agency, so I would love to have Shaw, if she can unmute and maybe introduce yourself and your role with community events.
Hi, my name is Shaw Rashidi Fard. I'm sorry I can't get my video to work, but I just wanted to just go over what a community event means. Basically, it has to be of a civic, political, public, educational nature. And we have some that are there already, like county fair, city festival, circuses. and other public gatherings that are approved by us as an agency. So an event, though, is very important that it cannot be more than 25 consecutive days in a 90-day period. So we get this a lot where people want to have an event all year round. We do not allow that. You can still go ahead if you have an event after 90 days, you have to get a new permit for another 90 days. So, but the big important thing is for all our events, you do have to go through the city. We do require the city of Santa Ana to actually approve the event first. We will not approve anything without city approval. That is really important. Also, private events. I know Sonia kind of talked about private events, what the city considered private events. For us, really, a private event is an event like a wedding or birthday where people who are invited are on a guest list. So if you're in a community and you have like a gathering in your community, really that gathering, if anybody from the public can come to it and it's not like invite only, that is considered a public event. So that's why we put these slides on there, because that's one of the things that causes a lot of confusions. So we have on there also certified farmers markets and swap meets. Those are different events altogether because those are annual events. So on certified farmers market, if someone's running a certified farmers market, they can have an annual permit and swap meets as well. However, there's a lot of requirements for a certified farmers market. I just want to mention a couple. A certified farmers market, for example, can only be run by a public agency like a city, a nonprofit, or a producer. So not anyone can go ahead and start a farmers market. So by the way, my name is Shah Rashidi. So I just want to say that. So that's that first slide. So if you guys have any other questions, let me know. Okay, so let me go over this slide. When you're participating in an event, there has to be an organizer that contacts the office and gets that whole ball kind of rolling. They would come into the office and, you know, discuss it with staff, email, or call, but they have to go ahead. There has to always be an event organizer permit, a person in charge of an event. If there's 2 or more food vendors also includes drinks. It doesn't have to necessarily be food in that sense, but it also, any beverages are also considered food. And all the contact information is over there. If you go to that website, there's going to be a video that kind of goes over all the requirements for you, and then you can always contact via email. Email is probably the best way if you want a quick response.
Thank you, Shah.
Sure.
Okay, let's go on to the next slide. Orange County Fire Authority. Do we have a contact? I think it's Josephine.
Yes, I'm one of the fire inspectors here in Santa Ana. Just going to briefly talk over our special event permits and our process. So we require permits for anything that has tents or canopies. We typically look at events with, if you have 7 or more easy ups together, we consider that a 700 square foot canopy. Tent. So we require a permit for that. Obviously, one way to avoid this is just making groups of 6 and allowing for a gap in between the next set of groups. Carnivals and fairs, any carnival rides, anything of that nature, we will review. Any special amusement buildings, mazes, and haunted houses, we review as well. Fireworks, especially special effects, anything with open fire, bonfires, or open cooking, we review as well. We have a special event permit screening form that we do request that you guys fill out. If there are no's, we won't need to review it. Let's see here. Any changes in use as for buildings. So if you're using, let's say a warehouse, for some reason you're using it for an event, we'll need to review that, as I'm sure police will too. Here's our screening form. So like I said, if you go through the screening form and everything is a no, we won't really need to review, but still submit this form as well. And then if you got a couple of yeses on this form, there's an additional special event permit. We just need some additional information as far as contact information. And then on this screening form as well, we do request that you provide a description of your event. Any questions regarding special events for OCFA?
Yes, Josephine, I think there's a question about stages. So would the fire authority need to know if there's going to be a stage constructed?
Yes, so it depends on what kind of stage. So obviously if you have, I think the city has like that mobile stage that we do not review. If it's anything outside of that realm, then we will probably need to review it, but I'm not sure that we'll need to issue a permit exactly.
And if I might add, the city does have a stage permit. So we wouldn't be able to, we would have to see your specifications of the stage. Like Josephine mentioned, if it's not the showmobile stage, if it's a constructed stage, we would need to know the specifications. So we would send that to our planning and building department. They would take a look at that and then they could let you know if a permit is required. And that's a little bit more of an elaborate permit process, but we'd be willing to answer any questions after the presentation if you'd like on that.
Perfect.
Thank you. Thank you, Josephine. Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
No, I think that's it. If we have any questions regarding LCFA permits, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Alyssa, next slide.
Sonia, we have a question. I think Oscar clarified that the stage would be 2 feet high. And Celica has asked if the showmobile is available.
In response to Oscar, there isn't a specific height requirement. If it's something that's constructed, still send us the measurements, and then we will check with planning and building if a permit will be required. We've asked for specific dimensions that we could provide to the public. You know, like you mentioned, oh, if it's not anything taller than 2 feet high, but they would really would prefer the specifications, or if it's, like I said, something that's going to be constructed, the layout of the stage so that they can be the one to let us know if a permit will be required or not. For the showmobile, as of right now, the showmobile is not available. So any events right now, you would have to obtain your own stage. For the contact list, we did add all of the departments here for park facility and film permits. It'll be myself under Parks and Recreation. Contact information is there. For special event permits, it'd be the police department, Amber Campos, and she'll be speaking in a few minutes regarding her permit process, as well as security and police community outreach. Land use certificates would be planning and building agency. We also have our business tax contact, Jessica Gonzalez, on this list if you have any questions regarding your exhibitors or vendors. The Sparta insurance link is also on this page if you wanted to inquire on quotes for future events. OC Healthcare Agency, there's a contact information, and as Sean mentioned, email is probably the best way to contact them, and their website is really great as well. It has tons of information, all of their applications. If I encourage you to check that out before your next event. And lastly, OC Fire Authority, we have a general phone number as well as the main contact information, contact number for Area 4, which is Santa Ana, as well as their email and website. All right, I think if there's no other questions for me, I'm going to go ahead and let Amber Campos speak on behalf of the Santa Ana Police Department.
Thank you, Sonia. Good evening, everybody. I will try to keep this as brief as possible, but concise. So Sonia and I share a very similar process. We use the same application. We have similar deadlines. But in regard to special events citywide, there at times may be requirements for security. So depending on the scope of your event, the police department may request that you have either police officers assigned to security or security guards. And so this section is going to cover that and then also give a little bit of an explanation on how that's paid for. And then we'll field some questions. So in terms of event security, the security requirements are determined by the Santa Ana Police Department on a case-by-case basis. It really does depend on the scope of your event. And there's so many factors, but really I'm going to focus on 4 factors that we consider when we are requiring security guards or police officers. So first, it's event size, the presence of alcohol or not, your event location, and the scope of your event. So the next slide. Okay, so when determining event size, this is a general guide. It's always up at the discretion of the department to make recommendations, even if something doesn't fall within these guidelines. And I just want to give that disclaimer. But so, for example, we've already determined through the special events policy, what we would consider a major, moderate, or minor event. So within regards to your attendance of your event, the general rule is if there's 500 attendees or more, then we require police officers to be present. And then you can see on the chart, so at the chart at the bottom on the left-hand side, it says events with alcohol. We would require, or I'm sorry, without alcohol, we would require 2 officers per 500 attendees or 1 security guard per 50 to 100 attendees. So we try to balance the cost with officers and security officers, again, depending on how many people are at the event. Sometimes we'll have special events where it's like, you know, it's a soccer game and there's, you know, 650 people on a field and it's relatively safe, it's family friendly, there's, you know, it's not a sensitive topic. So sometimes we won't require police officers, but we, you know, we'll recommend that we have a security guard. So again, it's really based, it's case by case determination. So on the next part, or I'm sorry, on the same slide, events with alcohol, the threshold goes down or the ratio goes down. So it'd be 2 officers per 200 attendees or 1 guard per 25 to 50 attendees. So the size of your event is a major factor. If we're talking about thousands of people, most likely police are going to be involved. And if it's smaller, you're going to have, you know, 150, 200 people. We may say, you know, based on this event, we require a security officer, but it really just depends on the size and then some of these other factors that we consider. So next slide. Your event site. So we consider the number of entrances and exits. We determine how large the square footage of your footprint. So if you're taking over multiple blocks, if you're taking over, you know, a small little, you know, half of a street or, you know, a small little, you know, driveway, really, it just varies depending on what you're attempting to accomplish. We consider the vehicle and pedestrian traffic. Are you looking at like Flower Street where there's buses and all kinds of, you know, things going on that street? So we consider public transit, vehicle and pedestrian traffic, and then also if you're taking over a sidewalk or things of that nature. So we take the amount of people and your location and then determine the risk, and we'll determine whether police is required. Next slide. Okay, next slide. Other factors to consider. I won't go through the entire list, but obviously if you're in a dangerous area, if we have calls for service and we know of a certain area that would require police, if your content is 21 and over, if you have alcohol, if it's a carnival, if you're going to have expensive equipment, if there's going to be street closures and you're going to have a parade or a march or a marathon. These are all factors that we consider when we combine everything with the amount of people that you're going to have, whether you're going to have alcohol or not, and then this sort of matrix in terms of activities will then determine the risk factor, and from there we'll assign what would be the appropriate safety measures to take place. Next slide. The same applies for film permits. If you're having a street closure and someone's filming on your block, we vet this through this process with basically these scenarios. And as you can see in the chart, majority of these things, police are required. So, but yeah, that's only applicable if those types of things are happening in your neighborhood. So next slide. Okay, so say you apply for an event and you're going to have 500 plus people in a block party, and there's going to be alcohol, and we determine that the risk, as a risk assessment, that we require police officers to be present. Now the question comes to, how is that funded? So I'll just go through this chart really quick to help explain the permit fees and even the cost for police officers. So we have police officers in our general budget that are out on patrol every day. Those officers have specific districts they're assigned to, as well as the other departments within the PD. So we don't have a room, I should say, we don't have, extra officers just hanging around the department in which we can dispatch to various events. We do have a community engagement team, and I'll explain briefly how they work and how they, what their role is in community events. But for the most part, when you have a special event that the PD is requiring that you have police officers or security officers, the expense is always at the event organizer. That's because we have to recall officers from their day off and require that they come in and work overtime. So they're coming from their home, and it's just not regular officers that we have hanging out that we can assign. So on this chart, you'll see the event type is, we'll start with city hosted events. So city hosted events are city produced events. So the 4th of July celebration, movies in the park, any of those types of events where the city itself is actually putting on the event, which is different from a city sponsored event or a city endorsed event. That's not what we're talking about here. This is specifically the city of Santa Ana is putting on this event. Police will provide security or to any kind of traffic enforcement, and community engagement teams are available, and that falls under our normal operating budget. The next type of event would be special events or community engagement. So the police department, we have a community engagement team, and they offer information booths. We will have officers and units with photo props or anything like that. So it's really for community education. So if you would like the police department to have a booth or be present at your event in that capacity, as long as scheduling permits it, our department for the most part says yes to invitations to these types of events. And so that's just a matter of contacting the department and getting that scheduled. That falls under our general operating budget. So the caveat with this is that the police officers that may attend these types of events are subject to calls. So they're not there to provide security for the event specifically. Of course, if they're there and something happens, our officers will respond, but they are at any given moment could be called out onto a special call, and they would have to leave. And the community engagement team that would be left behind would be civilian employees that they're uniformed, but they're civilians, and they're not providing security for your event. This is for educational and engagement purposes only. So that falls under our general budget, and that's covered. And our team, they love to be invited to community events. So I do encourage all of you, if you would like them to participate, to reach out, because they love to participate in community events. And then the last category are special events. So these are events that basically anytime you would apply with the city of Santa Ana for a street closure, for a block party, or whatever you want to do in your neighborhoods, and it's determined that police officers are required or event security, that is at the expense of the event organizer. And so I just noted on here, the starting rate is at $109.39. That is our hourly rate for an officer to come in on overtime to provide security for your event. Now we do take requests for security provided by police officers. So if you wanted a police officer to provide security for your event, say I don't require it, but you prefer to have the police officers, that again would be at the event organizer's expense. So yeah, that is the breakdown of how the police overtime is paid for. And again, if we require security guards, then that would be again at the expense of the event organizer. So do we have any questions regarding police community engagement or security or police requirements? All right, Alyssa, do I have another slide? That would be that.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Amber and Sonia for covering a lot of great information about the process. And we wanted to thank the attendees who are on this Zoom training. We want to thank you because of your motivation to produce events in your neighborhood, events that are going to bring families and youth and your neighbors together, is something that benefits the city of Santa Ana overall. And so we just appreciate your patience and just learning and becoming familiar, with the process as we move forward into this second segment of the training that covers more about the neighborhood association produced special events. Alyssa, I did see something on the chat.
Yeah, Celica asked if we can provide the information on the the community engagement police team.
Oh, the contact.
Yeah.
Amber, should they contact you or should it be the other police service officers?
I just dropped in Gabby Laufer. Her email is glaufer@santa-ana.org. She's the lead PSO that organizes community events.
Thank you, Amber.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Okay. So here we are, neighborhood associations. We know because a lot of you are getting ready to gear up, if not, you've already started organizing special events. We anticipate much more volume in terms of special events being produced in neighborhoods. And so, as a staff, we know that with the city council passing this new special events permit policy, there's a lot of coordination that is involved. So the first item we wanted to roll out is that we have a form that we've updated and made available. And we want to help ensure that there are several things happening as neighborhoods are working and partnering with other groups to produce events. We want to receive an acknowledgement form so that there's communication between the special events organizer, and it could be the same neighborhood board or someone else in the neighborhood who's communicating with the leadership of the neighborhood. So there are some instances where there are other community organizations that want to partner with you to put on the special event, but we just want to make sure that communication is happening so that we can move forward and evaluate the type of support that could be provided for these events. For an example, let's say that, I see Christina on the call from Morrison Park, with the Easter egg, hunt that they're organizing at Morrison Park. We know that this event is going to benefit the families in the neighborhood. And so there is, a process, and she as a board member is organizing the event. So it's self-explanatory, but at least we know that, we're being contacted and that we're letting the other departments know that, hey, this is a neighborhood produced event, and let's, figure out ways of supporting this event by, providing the neighborhood initiatives program, special event insurance process as an example. So that I just wanted to relay that as one item. But with this acknowledgement form, we're interested in knowing whether the special event is a non-revenue generating event. So meaning that the neighborhood is not charging anybody to attend this event or to participate. 2, that the majority of the organizing of this event is happening with the neighborhoods. And so this means that, we put an example, more than 60% of the planning is happening from the neighborhood. This is just a guideline, but it's to let you know as neighborhood association, leaders that will let us know that a lot of the organization is happening, in fact, from your team, from your group, from your board members or your volunteers. And 3rd, that the special event is open to everyone, in the neighborhood, meaning that you're getting the message out, you're getting the outreach so that you have a successful event. So what we're asking is when this form is completed, that this also be part of the submittal of your special events permit. And what this helps is to make sure that we're having some contact in advance, giving us a little bit more ample time so that we have your event on our tickler list. And this will help us and all the other departments anticipate what's in the pipeline. So we have this form available. It's been updated, and if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer some of the questions. And it's an acknowledgement that you are a board member or a representative of the neighborhood association, that you've been in communication, with the person or the group that's organizing the event, and that the neighborhood association board supports the event. So this will help, emphasize on that point. I see that we have some questions. Oh, there are comments, sorry. So that's the first part. And as I gave with the example below, we have some instructions when we know that this event is being produced, that it meets those guidelines. This is an example of support that we offer. So through our neighborhood initiatives program, we're able to provide that support for the insurance. That's always a big question. So you will not get charged with insurance. We work with our dynamic risk management team, to work with a third party to get all of the codes and everything lined up so that when they know that this is a city supported neighborhood produced event, that part will be covered. So we have this form too. And again, this is just, we can't emphasize enough the importance of communicating with us way in advance. I mean, the earlier you know, the better it'll help us, because we know that as this pandemic lessons, right, we're going to have a surge of positive things like more special events, right? Not negative things. So let's move on with the slide, Alyssa. So this next segment on our neighborhood initiatives presentation has to do with funding for that neighborhood associations may receive to put on special events. So the city of Santa Ana has an agreement with Charitable Ventures Orange County. They are a fiscal agent that we work with. And we established a project with them called Santa Ana Grants for Blocks. So this has been designed for neighborhood associations who do not have an established 501c3 nonprofit organization. However, they want to be able to tap into more resources to be able to get finance or donations to put on their special events, and specifically a vehicle by which they could pay vendors, they could be able to pay for some of the other services, or purchase items that they need for their special events. So this is a description of what our agreement is with Charitable Ventures. It's more of a general description, but it's supporting the type of engagement for community building events and activities. So Charitable Ventures is the nonprofit arm that the city partners with. And so they have hired professional staff who will make sure that we are complying with all of the nonprofit regulations. Everything that we need to comply with will be followed. And so that's why our project, the Neighborhood Initiatives Program through Santa Ana Grants for Blocks, is able to provide that coordination to support the neighborhoods. So we have, some neighborhoods that already have some funding available for special events that we are working with. So we've had, several special events related to the holidays or Thanksgiving as an example, other sports events that neighborhoods want to do. And so this gives you a pipeline by which to, help help ask for donations, but a process to get all of that going so that the vendors or the items that you need purchased for your event come through successfully. This slide here talks about the eligible activities. So we brought some of those examples, the resource fair, music activities, workshops, movie nights, your own neighborhood movie nights, or any field trips that you want to organize for neighborhood volunteers. We just want to make sure it's open to all community members. What we're asking for now, just to help us anticipate the special events that you want to organize and you want to tap into this service, should you receive funding or should you want to use your existing funding, we want to be notified on a quarterly basis what's in the pipeline on your special events calendar. We want to be able to work with you to go over the details, the budget, the documentation. It's quite a lot, but we will help guide you through that so you don't feel overwhelmed. We want to make sure that it's successful. And that way you can move forward with all the other components through our parks, and rec staff, or through our police department if it's a street closure. So drum roll, are you ready, Alyssa, to show the next slide? Okay, so this is just a visual that talks about the guidelines on the neighborhood use of program funds. Again, these are funds that neighborhoods, should they receive any kind of donation and they do not have a 501c3 nonprofit, this is how neighborhood initiatives will help support that and work with charitable ventures through the Santa Ana Grants for Blocks program. It's not a funding source. I just wanted to clarify that because I'm sure that's the first question, like, where do I apply, right? But it's a vehicle by which to receive and process funding deposits and payments. So what we explained is on this visual, and I wanted to get your attention on the second part of this slide, which has the event name. It's the table at the bottom. So this would be an opportunity for you to communicate to us, what you anticipate in the pipeline on a quarterly basis. We're asking for more time than what the permit applications ask, only because if you want to pay vendors, there's a process to get them onboarded. For example, there's a lot of forms that need to be completed. And we have to work with our partners to process that so that it's not so last minute, it's reasonable, and you have everything lined up and you're prepared. So I'm not saying that that's going to be the case all the time, but we just want to provide these guidelines to help you anticipate as you move forward to have a successful 2022 with your special events. Let's see if do we have another question, Alyssa?
Yes, so from Chris, her question is there a way for neighborhood leaders to be notified when a group requests permits for special events in our neighborhoods? And her example is a neighborhood block party planned for the 4th of July on a specific street when the church in our neighborhood requests and obtains a permit for the use of the park. It can help communicate what is happening to the affected neighbors.
What? Let me
Sonia?
let's unmute Chris. Okay, Christina from Morrison Park. Let's see if she can get her on the call. Okay,
I'm muted now.
you are unmuted, so go
Okay.
ahead.
Okay, this is kind of in between what you're talking about, but I thought of it and typed it in. I was wondering if someone in our neighborhood, such as myself or one of the officers of our neighborhood association, could be notified when someone is granted a permit to use like one of the parks or do a block party, not to prevent it, but just to be able to let other neighbors know that what's happening. As an example, we have the church in our neighborhood, which we work with very closely. At times they will ask for a permit to use the park for some function. Again, is great. We would just like to know when that happens. So other neighbors that are asking, why are all these people here or what's going on? We can explain it better. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, so let's see, Sonia, do we have you on, let's see, from a parks perspective, and then we can apply it on the example of a street closure. Go ahead.
Yes. Hi, Christina.
Hi.
So what we tend to do is if the event is going to impact the neighborhood, so for example, if it's a large scale event, there'll be like lots of lots of people parking at the park, then we do require the person applying to notify the neighborhood association reps, and we provide them a list, and that's usually sent out via email. And we get that list from Margarita. So we try to get the most up-to-date list. We know that sometimes members change from time to time. We don't do it for every event. There's some events that are very small scale and they don't affect the neighborhood at all. So for those, we wouldn't have the groups notify the neighborhood reps, but just for those that we believe would impact, or if the organizer wants to invite the neighborhood, which tends to be the case, then they're also welcome to use that list to advertise and provide the flyer.
Okay, it seems that I have not received personally any notification in the last couple of years, which is a little bit of a change. I think before it was more of a courtesy notification. And again, we're not saying we don't want the event to happen. We just would like to be more aware. And like Morrison Park is a big park, it's not approved for soccer. But if a group wants to have an event and play soccer, that's okay. But knowing the neighbors, knowing that it's not a park approved for soccer, it's a baseball field pretty much. When soccer players are there, we get phone calls like, why are soccer players there?
Right. And let me add, sometimes, unfortunately, if you're not notified, it could be that it's not a permitted event. And that
Absolutely.
and that could happen too. So feel free to use that, that special events email. Let us know. We do have our, as far as parks, we do have our recreation field attendants that every morning they get the list of all the permitted events and they go check all the parks. And they do check in to make sure that groups have permits, but unfortunately, they can't be everywhere at one time.
Absolutely.
So yeah, but we would love if our neighborhood association reps are out there and they see something and they weren't notified and it's a large scale event that's impacting the park, feel free to let us know and we'll definitely look into that.
Okay, absolutely. And again, we're not saying we don't want the events. It's just nice to get the heads up so I know, oh yeah, this is okay, this has been approved when someone calls or there's an issue versus going down there to ask for somebody's permit.
Right. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Amber, did you want to
unmute me? I have to remute me, I think.
Okay, I'll remute you, but I'll also turn it over to Amber to speak from the perspective of a street closure in a neighborhood.
Yes, so the police department, we do not have a process in place to notify neighborhood associations. I do know that Parks and Rec do require an email given the type of specific events. So I don't think it would be something difficult to add to our checklist. It would just be a matter of coordination with Margarita's office to get updated contacts to have the event organizers just maybe send their flyer or notify the neighborhood associations. But as of right now, we don't have that as a requirement, or it's just not, it hasn't been thought through with our office. So, yeah.
Yeah, and we just, Chris, thank you for the question. I think there's always an opportunity to, just like we're requiring for the neighborhoods to communicate with us, the way that we coordinate in-house and we're able to get in sync with neighborhood leaders. So there's more awareness, right? I think that's where you're coming from, and I'm sure others on the call as well. So yeah, we'll definitely, if we need to update, our list and also just coordinate with Amber, from the police department, I think we can accomplish that together. So thank you. Do we have any other questions on the chat, Alyssa, or anything else? Anybody else have questions regarding what we just covered on the guidelines for neighborhood use programs, or just other questions in general about tonight's training? I know we covered a lot, so.
I don't see any new questions.
Mary Lou, did you have questions, or Marta? I know Marta was typing some questions as well. Okay.
There's- Yeah, from Celica Diaz. How long does it take to get an application for an event approved?
Is it a Parks and Rec event or a regular special event?
Let's get Celica on the call. Go ahead, Celica. I think we've unmuted you.
Hi, my name is Celica Diaz and I live at Pacific Park. I'm the one that submitted the application for the first concert at the Pacific. I know the application has been changed, but I wanted to see, because I would like to have the event on June 25th. And I don't know how long it would take for, I'm kind of nervous because I don't know if it would take a long time for the application to be approved. And I don't know if I'm within the time frame because it says 6 months, but I'm hoping it'll be more like 45 days.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's definitely my office. So, okay, so the 6 months is basically you have a minimum of 30 days to get it in. So you're well within the time frame. The
Okay.
6 months meaning that what we don't want to allow is for people to just drop, basically applications all the way to the end of the year. We'd like to give people an opportunity to submit their application for use of space. And that's really relative to downtown because there's a lot of activity in the downtown area. So just so you know that the way the police department approaches special events and specifically with neighborhood initiatives and anything that's in the neighborhood, it's always a working yes, meaning that as long as the space is available, we work with you to make your event happen.
Okay.
And what we'll do is we'll guide you along the way to make sure you have the right insurances, that you have the security personnel and all of those types of things. So it does, just depending on the volume of applications that come in. I did see your application. It's in a stack of a few that came in at the same time.
Okay.
So you'll be getting an answer by the end of the week in terms of even just over the call. I don't think that space is reserved at all. So we'll just work together to make the event happen. So I'll be following up. Usually once the application is received, my office will follow up with a checklist of things that we need to do just to make sure that we're compliant and satisfying any requirements from the various agencies. But typically 30 days to get your application in from your event day. Parks and Rec, it's 45 minimum. So if you're wanting to use a park, you need to get your application in at least 45 days. If you have a major event where you're going to have over 1,000 people, I would get it in, even 90 days before. But for the police department, regardless of the size, we have a 30-day minimum. And then we have up until 10 days before your event to get the permit issued to you. So from that 30-day marker to the 10-day, up until about a week or so before your event, we're working on the checklist together to make sure that everything is satisfied. But that's the time frame.
Okay. I'll also be sending in photos of the stage. It's a small stage. It's not a big one. I think it's within the 2 feet requirement.
Yes, do send that over and send over the specifics of even just how the width and the length and the height and all of that. I think Sonia touched on this, that for the most part, people say it's a 2-foot rule, but it actually isn't. It depends on, if you have this massive stage that's wrapped around the whole park, then it's a completely different structure. So dimensions along with the picture would be great.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Celica, for the question. Do we have any other questions from the team, from the attendees? Okay. So this concludes our special event virtual training, part 1. I'm sure we're all going to learn through this process as we're better coordinated and in alignment with the neighborhood associations and other groups who want to hold special events. So yes, you know where to reach us for neighborhood initiatives, and we will figure out a way for making this presentation available. And just appreciate everyone's time tonight. So thank you to our team, to our county teammates as well for being part of this process. And yeah, we'll continue to work with you moving forward. Thank you again and have a good night.
Right.
Good night.
Thank you.